Okay, so here we are. This is the second part of the canvas board painting that I started a while ago, and there's a part one and this is part two. So this is kind of messy, but it's only the first layers, so I'm good with that. I've mixed up the palette that I want to use, and I'll show that to you. I have some of my own colors mixed up here, but it's basically phthalo blue again and a little bit of turquoise, and then a naphthol crimson, yellow ochre, and burnt sienna, and then I've mixed up some other colors that include those colors. So I'm going to start with the sky, and I'm going to start with the white and some of the phthalo blue, and I put a little bit of black in there to make it a little darker. So we'll start there, and we'll clean this up a little bit and make it look more like sky, and then we'll go into the horizon line, which will have some color in it, and then the tree line down here. This is a little too red, so I'm gonna add some burnt sienna to that along with the red and make it a lot of fallish colors. Okay, so let me get a paper towel to wipe my knife. And I have gotten so used to using these cheap plastic knives, I use them more than my steel palette knives. They work fine for me, so whatever works for you, that's what you should use. So I'm going to turn this around like this so the sky is closer to me, and I'll start with just some white and then some of the phthalo blue and the black, and we'll start making some sense of the sky. I tend to overdo the colors to begin with, like that's a pretty dark sky, but I will lighten it up as we go with more white. And there's already some texture left from the first layers, and I like that a lot. I think that portion of the sky that's closer to the tree line is going to end up being more pink, because that will blend in more with the tree line that I have decided to use. Oops, there's a piece of something in there. Okay, we'll let that dry a little bit. One other thing I like to do is let the paint dry a little bit and then work back into it. So now I think I'll start with, this is burnt sienna and red mixed together. I just want a touch of that to kind of reflect what the tree line is going to look like. So I'll add a little white and just a touch of that burnt sienna and red, which ends up being a beautiful sky pink color. And then maybe we want a little bit of that reflecting more higher into the sky. And then fingers work for blending really well. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it around and work on the tree line for a while. Before I do that, I'm going to add just a little bit of white and hardly blend it in. Okay, now I'm not sure how this color is going to work. I might have to adjust it some, but I want to start with this. This is the burnt sienna, Naphthol red, Naphthol crimson, and I added just a touch of black to that to darken it up a little bit. I love mixing colors too. It's always so surprising to see what you can come up with when you mix colors. Sometimes they're mud, but sometimes you get such great variations. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is turn this around again. Don't need any fingerprints in the sky. And blend this up into the sky. And now just a touch of white on my fingertip. These can always be adjusted as I go. I just want to get the feeling for what I want this to look like. And some of that lighter sky always dips down into the horizon and the tree line and up into the sky too. Flip this around again and add some more of this darker color, blend that in. Now I have some yellow ochre here that I'm going to use just a touch to spread that into the horizon and the trees. I might not end up liking that, but I can always put another layer of the darker color over it. I just want to add some depth to that. What this would look like if I had a little bit of pink, just pink to the top. That's going to need some more work, but I'm going to go ahead and wipe this off, and I'm going to, this is just straight burnt sienna. I want to get some color down here, and I might even want this a little darker, so I'm gonna just do a dab of black into that. This will end up being really blended, and since it's the first layer, a lot of this is going to end up being covered up, but some of this will show through. I'm going to want more texture down here in the foreground anyway, so we'll just add a little bit more of this and a little bit more of black and come up to that, what I call the tree line here, which my trees are very abstract, but I like them that way. You can always define them more as trees if you'd rather have that. That might have been a little bit too much black. But again, everything is fixable with another layer of color. You really can't make a mistake. Always add more color, which adds more depth and more texture, and that's the best part. Okay, now we're going to get a little lighter. I want the foreground to end up being more of this gold, this yellow ochre color, which it will all blend in. But for now, I'm just going to put a straight line of this across and blend some of that together. One other thing I've realized with acrylics, that if you leave your work for a while and it dries out a little bit, if you work back into that with some wet acrylic, some fresh acrylic, you can move that underpainting, the underlayer, around just a little, just enough to blend it in. And then I want some of this lighter color to come down way into the foreground. And sometimes I'll show you something else that I do. I don't always, when I start a painting, I don't think about a focal point. So at some point I might work back into this, scrape this a little, and make a focal point right in here. And some of that color will come down into the foreground so it all blends together. So now I'm going to do something that might not work, but again, everything's fixable. I want some of that skylight to come down into the foreground like this. So that's the beginning of the focal point. And I want this to dip down a little bit here, like this, on both sides. Okay, and now I'm going to go back up here and cover some of this up. See how I can scrape into that and then move that paint around? It causes more texture. And the light is never... Oh, see what happens when I don't clean my knife off? Let me go around like this and blend that in a little bit more. Just a touch of this. Okay, so I'm going to take some of this darker color . The more layers you put on, the more you build up that texture, and then as you work it, those colors catch on the texture and it all blends in really well. This might need a couple more layers, but I think you're getting the idea of how I paint. And now I'm going to take some of the yellow ochre and some white, and I'm going to lighten this up a lot because that's where the light is coming through. And if you scrape down, you're going to get some of those undercolors, which happens with real light too. So I think I'll stop this video now and let this dry and take a look at it. And let me know what you think. If you have any questions, if you have any questions about how I mix my color palette, just leave them in the comments. This is not done yet. It still needs some fine tuning, but it's getting there. So, okay, I hope this was helpful. Thanks.